In Wagonville, South Carolina, there are usually only 2 seasons, damp and damper. But that day, the skies were clear, the sun unusually warm, and the birds chirped, as if unaware that property taxes were about to go up. Janelle Watkins, 30, a black librarian in her 34th week of pregnancy, had just finished her shift at the library. She wasn't in a rush. No one was waiting at home except a rack of smoked ribs she'd been mentally marinating since noon. She strolled leisurely down Magnolia Avenue, holding a bag of fruit from the corner store. Her other hand rested on her belly where the baby occasionally kicked, as if asking, "Mama, are we home yet?" She smiled, picturing her husband Malcolm lounging at the Veterans Resource Center. He ran. He had no idea he'd be treated to Janelle-style BBQ tonight, which meant more sauce than conversation. Everything was peaceful, until a strange sound shattered the calm. Not a car horn, not the neighbor's overly ambitious rooster, but the slow, calculating growl of a police cruiser, the kind that sounded like it was trying to decide who to bother today. A white-gray patrol car, the color that only exists in states that are both anonymous and mysterious. Like regulations on black students' hairstyles, slowly crept up behind her. The window rolled down, revealing a bald-headed man with a square jaw and eyes that were anything but friendly. Officer Chad McFlynn, known in the community by many names, not printable in local newspapers, was the kind of man who would interrogate a statue if it looked suspicious enough. "Stay right there!" His voice rang out, like he'd just caught someone distributing revolutionary pamphlets. Janelle turned around, startled. I'm just walking home," she said, her voice so gentle it could have been used as background for an ASMR video. McFlynn stepped out of the car with a look like she'd just stolen his belief system. "Do you have any idea how suspicious you look?" Janelle, an expert in conflict resolution in a neighborhood short on both books and chairs, tried to smile. "I'm just pregnant. And walking, sir. Pretty sure that's not illegal." McFlynn squinted his hand, resting on his utility belt, stocked like he was prepping for World War III. Walking unusually slowly, avoiding eye contact, could be evasive behavior. Possibly? He glanced at her bag of oranges, a suspicious object. Janelle looked up at him, belly large, sweat beading, still trying to stay calm. "They're oranges. For vitamin C. For the baby." In a city where walking while pregnant could be considered an act of resistance, tragedy doesn't take holidays. What happened next made the entire block ask, "Since when is breathing peacefully a thing that needs regulation, Mrs. Gloria Jenkins?" Full name: Gloria Alberta Jenkins, 68 years old, retired elementary school teacher, expert in killing misbehavior with a stare. Was just planning to pick up onions and some olive oil. The weather was so nice, she decided to skip the bus and take a stroll to stretch her legs. She wore a purple baseball cap, with the pin "I survived the 60s. What's your excuse?" Carried a cloth backpack embroidered with "Don't touch my purse," and walked out of the store with just a few simple items. Everything was peaceful until a Crown Victoria police cruiser rolled up heavy as someone's passed trying to stay buried. The car slowed beside her. The window rolled down, and from inside came the voice of a white man. "Stop! I need to talk to you, Mrs." Gloria looked up, face polite, but weary. It was Officer Chad Remington, tall white, balding at the crown, with eyes so small they could dodge taxes. The badge on his chest glinted like it was trying to cover up the shady ethics beneath. Remington stepped out with all the gravity of a man who thought he'd uncovered a terrorist plot. in the form of an old woman with onions. "What are you doing here?" he asked, hand on his belt where his gun hung like a late Christmas ornament. Mrs. Gloria blinked. "Me? I'm walking home. You know this is a quiet residential area, right?" Remington said like he was lecturing a cat. "Oh, yes. I've lived here since Nixon was president," Gloria replied, trying to stay calm. Remington frowned. "I saw you standing in front of that store too long. That's suspicious behavior." "Young man, I'm 68. My knees have their own GPS. I stopped because they were recalculating." She said it with perfect manners and just enough sarcasm to be memorable. And just like that, with the speed and absurdity of a boot to the face of civil rights history. Remington advanced, ordering her to put your hands up and stop acting strangely. A woman carrying onions and a floral embroidered backpack was now classified as a national threat. From afar, a few people began filming. A college student whispered, "Wait, what's even weird about this?" A middle-aged black man shook his head and said to his wife, "Here we go again." As for Remington, his eyes were bloodshot, his hand still on his gun, and the fear he felt wasn't from Gloria. It was from what he couldn't control. A black woman who wasn't afraid of him, Nora Beauregard. Yes, Nora. 8 months pregnant. Walking home had just rounded the corner in front of Mr. Rufus's barber shop, when suddenly tires screeched like a low-budget action film, a white-gray patrol car with a "protecting the community" decal, gleaming with bitter irony, crept up beside her. Inside sat Officer Gerald Jerry Whitley, a white man with a beer belly and a face that seemed suspicious of everything, from fried chicken to the Constitution. He looked at Nora like she'd just stolen a park bench. Nora, one hand holding her bag of oranges, the other resting on her belly, stopped walking. She didn't know she'd just stepped into the lead role of America's latest satirical tragedy. "Hey, you!" Jerry stepped out, his gun still holstered, but his gaze fully loaded. "What are you doing here?" Loitering. Nora blinked. I'm just walking home. I live 2 blocks away, "Don't we all live nearby?" Jerry muttered, scribbling something on an imaginary citation. Maternity dress bag of oranges, walking slow. "Yeah, that's suspicious." At this point, any sane viewer would think, "Please tell me this is a joke." But no, in Elmwood, Georgia, a city where statues of Confederate generals still get weekly polishings, a black pregnant woman showing up unannounced in the town center is considered a security risk. Nora tried to stay calm. She spoke quietly, politely, just like her mother had taught her. "I don't mean any trouble. I'm just walking. I'm about to have dinner with my husband." But to Jerry, polite tone was an act of arrogance. He barked, "Don't try to be clever with me. When I ask a question, I want a straight answer. Do you have ID? What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Nora gently rubbed her belly. The baby kicked as if protesting the situation, the only way it knew how. "From the inside, officer," she whispered. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to go home." That sentence, seemingly simple, was the spark. Because in Elmwood, when you're black and just want to go home, it means you're too confident. And confidence in the eyes of the system must be corrected. And we haven't even mentioned the bag of oranges falling to the ground, or the shove that's about to happen. But be patient. The oranges won't be the only thing rolling across the sidewalk that day. If you ever thought cruelty followed a schedule, think again. At Claymore bus stop, 3:42 p.m., cruelty didn't need an appointment. Officer Chad Berkeley, white beer belly, cheap cologne, and a mindset forged in the fires of group chats, titled, "Back the Blue." Ignore the bruise. decided today was a good day to assert dominance over an elderly black woman in purple. When Chad's boot struck Mrs. Loretta's stomach, it didn't just launch her bag of biscuits into the air like a Walmart-style firework. It jolted an indifferent world into consciousness. Mrs. Loretta's scream didn't sound like a scream. It sounded like dignity breaking. A soft crack echoing like a Sunday church bell. But instead of holiness, it reeked of injustice. People nearby, from the headphone-wearing student to the single mother carrying her child, froze. A few screamed, "Call 911." Someone live-streamed, hands trembling. No one intervened. No one dared. Chad Berkeley. His name tag as big as his ego, simply looked down, then turned away, as if he'd just kicked over a garbage bag instead of a human being. An elderly woman, pregnant, black, innocent. But what Chad didn't know was that kick wasn't just aimed at Mrs. Loretta. It struck the conscience of an entire community. And this time, for once, there was a camera. There was evidence, and there was a rage that had fermented for centuries of being dismissed as isolated incidents. In the ambulance, Mrs. Loretta kept whispering one name, Earl, her husband. And somewhere across town, when Mr. Earl Washington picked up the phone and heard the doctor say, "Your wife was kicked in the stomach by a police officer," something inside him shattered. Not just his heart, but the composure of a man far too familiar with being silenced. But this time, he wasn't planning on staying silent. As for Chad Berkeley, well, he was about to learn the meaning of media firestorm at Meadowville General Hospital, where the scent of antiseptic was stronger than the rotting stench of delayed justice. Gavin walked in with the look of someone returning from war. Because, truthfully, he had. But today, his battlefield was the hospital hallway, where his wife Tiana lay barely conscious after being kicked in the stomach by a police officer for the crime of walking home while pregnant. And just a little too black. A young nurse, visibly shaken, pointed to room 408, where Tiana was under special monitoring. Gavin nodded, thanked her, but inside, rage churned so hot it could have melted a heart monitor. He opened the door, and his heart felt like it was being crushed. Tiana lay there, her brown skin pale under the fluorescent lights, belly wrapped in white gauze. Her eyes were swollen, lips cracked. And every breath sounded like a cry for help. "Are you okay?" Gavin asked softly, his voice lower than usual. Tiana tried to smile, but her tears betrayed her. "He kicked me, Gavin. He knew I was pregnant, and he still did it." That was the moment Gavin Monroe, former Marine, a man trained to stay calm under fire, felt like he was about to explode. Not because he was weak, but because for the first time he faced an enemy who wore no uniform, carried no rifle, but was backed by an entire system. A white police officer armed with power and prejudice, shaken like a cheap cocktail. The doctor entered, nodded politely at Gavin, and began to speak in words colder than ice. "We're monitoring for potential placental abruption, which could affect oxygen and blood flow to the fetus. But the baby's heartbeat is still strong." Gavin nodded, but all he heard was one sentence: "He could have killed my wife and child, and he's still getting paid." Outside the hospital, while officials continued to conduct an internal investigation. A phrase meaning, "We're waiting for the social media storm to die down." A crowd began to form. At first, just a few people holding candles. Then dozens, then hundreds. They didn't shout. They stood there silent, looking up at Tiana's hospital window. On one sign in bold letters, Walking while pregnant is not a crime. Gavin stood by the window staring down at the crowd. In that moment, he understood. This wasn't just about Tiana. It was about every black woman who had ever been disrespected, hurt, and forced into silence, pressed against the pavement while the world looked away. He took Tiana's hand. "We're not letting him get away with this." "Not this time." Tiana squeezed his hand, eyes wet. "Just don't lose yourself in the fight." Gavin looked into her eyes. "I won't, but I will make sure they know. They kicked the wrong woman and messed with the wrong man." St. Hilary Memorial Hospital is known for 3 things: terrible coffee Wi-Fi, weaker than a politician's conscience, and nurses so blunt they could make you confess to crimes you didn't commit. But that afternoon, what became most famous was the ambulance carrying a pregnant black woman who had been kicked in the stomach by a white police officer in the middle of the street. Clarence Boone, or just Boone to his fellow combat vets, had just received a call from a nurse along with a message. "Your wife is here. It's serious. She was assaulted by a cop." "You were the first name," she said when she woke up. "Can you come now? And if you show up with a machete, I'll pretend I didn't see it." Clarence, a former Marine, now running a trauma support center for veterans, said nothing. He simply stood up, quietly, pulled out his wallet, took his insurance card, and tucked a sonogram photo into his chest pocket. A reminder he wasn't allowed to lose control. Then he left. And when he arrived at the emergency room, time seemed to stop. Macy, the woman he loved, lay there, eyes red and swollen, belly still bandaged, her hand resting gently on the spot where an orange had once rolled out from her bag. She didn't speak for 10 seconds. She didn't need to. Her eyes told Clarence everything. That man hadn't just kicked her stomach. He had kicked the heart they shared. "He knew I was pregnant," Macy whispered, voice trembling. "I told him, I begged him, but he still did it." Clarence dropped to his knees beside the bed. His eyes that had seen war, were now red with something no battlefield had prepared him for: the helplessness of seeing the one you love in pain. "The baby's still there," Macy whispered. "I felt it. Afterward, a little kick. It's still here." Clarence didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just nodded silently, making a vow, not to God, to himself. A nurse entered, eyeing Clarence like she wanted to ask, "What are you planning to do?" But then she saw his eyes, a terrifying calm, the kind of calm that meant he had already decided before he even stepped foot inside the hospital. "I'm here now," he said to Macy, gripping her hand. "From this point forward, no one touches you or our baby. Except doctors. Good ones, not the kind who draw guns faster than they draw Band-Aids." In the corner, the hospital TV played the news. That video was being replayed. And this time, people weren't just seeing Macy getting kicked. They were seeing an entire system exposing its own spine. As for Clarence, he didn't look at the screen. He looked at Macy, and in his eyes was something soft as a lullaby and sharp as a blade. This wasn't going to end with an apology letter. It would end with a battle, and Clarence was ready. At 3 a.m., while most of the city was asleep dreaming tax-free dreams, in a small hospital room on the 4th floor, Mr. Darnell Brewster was not dreaming. He wasn't sleeping. His eyes were wide open like he was waiting for a call from the FBI, but what he was waiting for was the fetal heart scan, and more importantly, the full name of the idiot white cop who kicked his wife in the stomach. Loretta Brewster, the woman who could teach every child in the neighborhood to read by age 4. With just a firm look, Darnell wasn't the type to make a big deal. He had served in the Marines, brokered peace with tribal leaders in Afghanistan, using only a cup of coffee and a life lesson about fried chicken. But that morning, when he saw Loretta lying there, hand on her belly, smiling just enough to keep him from worrying, something inside him broke. Not a sad kind of break, a strategic one. The kind of break that makes a man take off his blazer, lay it gently over a chair, and begin planning a legal hurricane capable of flattening an entire police department without firing a single shot. He picked up his phone, called Tiffany, his cousin, a lawyer who made a career suing insurance companies for underestimating acrylic nail damage. All he said was 5 words. "They kicked my wife." And on the other end came keyboard, clacks, gasps, and the immortal reply, "All right, let me call the team." Meanwhile, the video of Loretta's assault had gone more viral than Beyoncé's Grammy slip. TikTok accounts began posting clips titled, "5 Signs You Live in a Racist Society," where pregnant black women are national security threats. On Reddit, outcry justice for Loretta exploded with debates like, can that cop even tell the difference between waiting at a crosswalk and robbing a bank? The once quiet city was no longer silent. Outside the hospital, people gathered. They didn't chant. They stood. They were silent. Each person held a sign. A young brown-skinned girl carried a handwritten one. "Ms. Loretta's baby is supposed to be my future classmate. Don't take my friend before I meet them." An old black man in a Wit2 helmet stood tall, holding, "I fought Nazis. Now I fight ignorance." From the 4th-floor window, Darnell saw it all, and he knew they weren't just standing for Loretta. They were standing for everyone like her. Everyone who had been silenced for too long. And now Darnell wasn't staying silent anymore. He turned back to Loretta, sleeping. Her curly hair now braided neatly by nurses. Her face, though bruised, still held a defiant grace. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Rest, love. Your part is done. Now it's my turn." A 38-second video clip. No title, no filter, no TikTok music. Just raw reality was already online, uploaded by a high schooler named Tori, who had just finished screaming. While pressing post, shaking hands, she recorded it with a chipped phone. Within an hour, the video spread faster than Black Friday electronics deals. The caption was short and sharp. He kicked a pregnant woman. In the street. In daylight. In front of humanity. Hat justice. For Loretta. When Miles Jenkins walked out of the ER, his mind still spinning from the beep of heart monitors and Loretta's groans every time the nurse pressed on her belly, nearly 60 people were standing silently on the hospital steps outside. No shouting, no outrage, just silence, candles, and eyes that refused to look away. The first to speak to him was an elderly black woman in a wide-brimmed straw hat, holding a sign written in red ink. "My daughter went through the same, but no one recorded it." Miles didn't say a word. He just nodded, lips pressed tight. Because now he understood this was no longer just Loretta's story. It was the story of those who'd been labeled suspicious for walking slowly, the story of those interrogated for resembling someone in a report, the story of those who had never been allowed to be the credible victim. And this time, they weren't staying quiet. That night, Miles sat beside Loretta's bed. She was asleep, hand resting gently on her belly. The monitor beeped steadily. Beep. Beep. Like a countdown to a city's awakening fury. Miles played the video again for the 17th time, not to torture himself, but to memorize every detail. The way the officer Sergeant Chad Crumley, 47, known for driving slow to observe citizens, raised his arm, like scratching his head, then suddenly shoved her hard. The way Loretta fell, her bag of biscuits scattering like the final symbol of gentleness crushed beneath a boot. He texted attorney Melinda Harris, a college friend, now the only person who could snap prosecutors out of their slumber. Crumley kicked my wife in the stomach. There's video. And now the whole country is watching. 3 dots appeared in under 10 seconds. Charging my laptop. Let's go. And just like that, the fire was lit. Not a fire of vague outrage, but a fire fueled by evidence, kindled by cameras, and fanned by public will. As for Miles Jenkins, he didn't need to be a hero. He just needed to make sure of one thing. This time, they don't get to erase the footage. The day of the verdict. No chance. No waving banners. Just a damp, cloudy morning and a courtroom cold as hard-boiled egg whites. In the front row, Loretta wore a deep violet dress paired with her Resistance Edition wide-brimmed hat, seated beside her husband. Her hand held his, not trembling anymore, but steady. Former officer Garth Mutton. No longer officer, now sat at the defendant's table wearing a pale gray suit that matched the tone of his behavior throughout the trial. No badge, no authority, just evasive eyes and a twitching jaw, as if wondering whether he'd left something in the trunk, like, say, a conscience. The prosecutor opened with the video. Yes, that video. Not on TikTok. No sad cat memes. Just a giant LED screen in the middle of the courtroom. The jury held their breath. They saw Loretta holding a bag of red beans, walking slowly across the bus stop, smiling at a child, until a police SUV sped in like it was auditioning for an action movie that forgot ethics. She's loitering. Mutton's voice growled in the clip, dumb and hostile, like he'd graduated from the Combat Basic Decency boot camp. And then the shove. The fall. That sigh, like Loretta had somehow ruined his coffee break. The courtroom was dead silent, save for the sharp inhale from someone in the back. A reporter, maybe? Or someone realizing the system had gotten too comfortable kicking truth in the gut. Then came the witnesses, the student who filmed it, the 911 caller, the doctor who treated Loretta, and the centerpiece of the morning, Loretta herself taking the stand. I just wanted to catch a bus, she said. No grand demands, no quest for power. I just wanted to go home without being assaulted by someone paid to protect me. Silence again. When he said I looked suspicious because I was sitting at a bus stop wearing orange socks, Loretta said I had to wonder, was my skin tone just too perfectly matched with the bench? She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Each word was a slap, not of revenge, but a wake-up call to a system dozing off on its own impunity. Mutton's lawyer tried to defend him, claiming it was a tense situation and that he felt threatened, because clearly a 70-year-old black woman carrying red beans in a floral dress is a top-tier biohazard. The jury took less than 3 hours. When they returned, the room held its breath. We find the defendant, Garth Mutton, guilty on all counts. Gavin, Loretta's husband, gave her hand a gentle squeeze. She simply smiled and nodded, not because she had won, but because she was still standing tall. And Mutton wasn't. Outside the courthouse, Loretta didn't say much. She looked straight into the camera and said, I'm not a victim. I am the flame. And we've only just started lighting the fire. The story didn't end with the verdict. The story was only beginning from the heart, from laughter, and even from a pair of orange socks. As the courtroom lights dimmed, The air outside shifted. Gone were the pounding heartbeats. The tension, all that remained was a quiet wave of applause, the soft exhales of those who had followed this journey since day one. Right on the courthouse steps. Mrs. Ernestine was no longer standing alone. She stood beside Leroy, her husband whose hand had not left hers once throughout the ordeal, and behind them stood hundreds, students, single mothers, old men in sunglasses from the Nixon era. Everyone stood silent, listening as reporters raised their microphones. For the first time in weeks, it was Ernestine who stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. She didn't read a manifesto. She didn't give a speech. She simply said, "I'm 70 years old. I lived through Jim Crow, through the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Through the years, people said, 'Wait, justice will come.' But I don't have time to wait anymore, and my grandchildren shouldn't have to either." The crowd held its breath. Someone whispered, "Amen." A reporter asked, "Ma'am, do you think the verdict was enough?" Ernestine smiled the smile of someone no longer afraid. "I don't think justice is a verdict. I think it's a process. But today, at least we saw the system feel shame." Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a purple hat, the very one a police officer had kicked beneath the bus stop. She placed it on her head, adjusted the strap carefully, and said something that made every reporter fall silent. "They can kick off my hat, but they can't kick down my will, and now I'll wear this hat all the way to Capitol Hill if I have to." 2 weeks later, Ernestine officially opened the first office of the Purple Hat Foundation, providing legal and emotional support for elderly citizens harassed by police. The headquarters was set up right next to the police station for convenience, she said with a grin. Leroy was put in charge of making coffee and posting memes on the foundation's Facebook page where the satirical slogan, "So Very." Ernestine read, "We're old, our knees ache, but we know how to sue." On her 71st birthday, Leroy gave her a cake with a cartoon of Officer Donnie, working in a correctional facility. Ernestine laughed. Sweet, but it'd be better with a little justice on top. A few months later, when she was invited to speak at a symposium on policing reform, she ended her speech with, "We're not asking for privilege. We're just asking not to get kicked in the stomach for trying to catch a bus." And the entire room stood not out of pity, but out of profound respect.